Well, good evening and welcome to this clothing optional live stream meditation and Dharma talk. That is to say, clothing optional for you, because I'm assuming you're home, and not clothing optional for me, just to spare you. Many thank yous before we begin. First of all, to you, thank you for joining. Thank you to Ira Strauss for your piano playing. Thank you to our amazing producers, Glenn Harrison and Leo Gimo. Isn't that an awesome name, Leo Gimo? I also want to thank our mindful movement teacher tonight, who led class at 6:30, and to Ray Manioki and Tara Cassidy for hosting the mindful dialogue class after this class. If you'd like to know more about mindful movement beforehand and the mindful dialogue after, check my Facebook page. You'll find more information how to get to those links. Kind of gives you the complete package. You do some movement to get energized and settled, meditation, talk, and then some time to connect with others to discuss the talk, to discuss how your practice is going. A big thank you as well to the Insight Meditation Community of Washington for hosting, and also big thanks to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Arlington for being our home when we're not online. All my talks are available online through my podcast, on my website, on YouTube. If you'd like to join the mailing list to get updates and a monthly newsletter with talks and tips and my photos and videos and lots of stuff, you can sign up online. And finally, thank you for your support. This only happens because of generosity that allows me to live the lavish lifestyle I do and to offer these talks and these practices freely, so no one's denied access. If you'd like to make a donation, you can go through my website. If you'd like to make a donation to the Mindful Movement teacher, to Ray and Tara, you can do that through their links. You can also make a donation to the Insight Meditation Community of Washington, and if you like as well, to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Arlington. That's lots of places to give, but thank you for your presence and for helping to move this forward. I think I'm out of announcements, so that means it's time for meditation. It's important before we begin just to remember that this is an embodied practice. This is about being awake in the senses, so our primary point of attention is going to be resting awareness in the here and now. And we're going to go through 3 phases through this meditation. The first is a phase of gathering attention, bringing your attention back and resting in the present moment. The second phase will be what I think of as taking the seat of the witness, where you are the observer of what's changing. And toward the end, we'll explore a little bit more about just resting in presence. The analogy I like, which is somewhat imperfect, or the phrase, is focus, flow, and let go. Focus as you gather attention, as you take this seat of the observer, opening to the sense of flow, of what's changing, and then letting go, or letting be. So if you like, you can close your eyes and just take a few moments to just check in with your posture. Is there a way that you might sit that could help you to be a little more relaxed and yet at the same time a little alert? And you know what? Let's do my favorite stretch for sitting. So if you're familiar with this, you can do this with your eyes closed. If you like, you can open your eyes. But lifting your hands, bring your thumbs into the hitchhiker position, and then point the thumbs behind you with your elbows right about at shoulder level. Begin to deepen and slow down your breath, and then actively begin to draw your shoulder blades close together. Draw the shoulder blades together and down slightly. Now you're not straining, so you're not going beyond 75 or 80% of your capacity, but what you are doing is you're holding the contraction here between the shoulder blades. And this will be greatly enhanced by slowing down and deepening your breath. And as you breathe, imagine you're filling the upper lobes of your lungs with air. If you'd like to activate this even more, you can draw the navel in toward your spine. Open the elbows out just slightly and breathe. Lift the chin slightly if you like. Imagine you're breathing your heart forward as you hold the contraction between the shoulder blades, Drawing the shoulder blades down slightly. 2 more long and slow, full, deep breaths. And when you hold this for about a minute, you'll begin to feel a nice little reset. And now if you like, reach your arms up overhead. Smile like they do in the commercials when they wake up in the morning. And then slowly, slowly lower the hands. You can do this ultra slow motion, or you can just let your hands begin to float down toward your lap at any speed that feels right for you. And just sense anything that may have shifted on the inside. Notice the breath. A wonderful way to gather attention is to narrow your awareness onto your breathing. You might like to now, on the next inhalation, breathe in slow, full, and deep to the count of 4 or 5. And then exhale slowly to the count of 4 or 5. Inhale. Exhale. And now matching the length of the in-breath with the length of the out-breath. Allow yourself to concentrate, but also at the same time just to really feel what happens inside. As we continue for just a little bit longer, you might like to just pause for a moment, just the top of the inhalation. And then pause briefly at the end of the exhalation and just savor those moments of stillness where the breath is completely still. And now, over the next 3 rounds of breath, how intimately can you feel the breath? Slow and deep and smooth. And if you like, you can now, on the next exhalation, let go of all control of your breath. And moving now into observation of your breath. As you unlock any control of the breath, feel your breath slow and deep and smooth and effortless. Taking this time to more intimately collect and land on the inside. And feel the crown of the head from the inside. Feel the scalp. And could you feel your forehead smooth? Could you soften the little muscles around your eyes? Relaxing the muscles of the face. And you might for a moment bring the tip of your tongue right behind your front teeth, or slightly behind. And then relax your jaw. You'll find the jaw will relax a little bit when you do that. And now sense if you can relax your tongue and let it fill your lower jaw. And could you now relax the root of your tongue down into your throat and just sense this whole mechanism of the jaw and the tongue deeply relaxed. And feel the volume of your lips. Feel the back of the head and the base of the skull. And the back of the neck and the tops of the shoulders. And the throat. And sensing now the weight and the volume and the length of your arms. And the lower back and the buttocks. Is it possible to soften the belly? Could you soften the lower abdomen? Sensing the floor of the pelvis and the hip joints. And sensing now the legs, the weight and the volume and the length of your legs, from the hips down through the knees. The knees down through the ankles. The tops of the feet and the toes. The soles of the feet and the heels. The backs of the hands. The palms of the hands. And the thumbs and fingers. Relaxed and at the same time alert. And you might again now sense the breath. Where do you feel this breath the most predominant on the inside right now? And if you'd like to use your breath as your anchor or your focal point, you might sense either the breath at the belly and the breath at the nostrils or septum, or perhaps just tracking where you feel the breath the strongest. And let this be your way of re-arriving and coming home. But you might like to use sound as your anchor. Take a moment just to sense the aliveness of the sound vibrations around you. An alternative anchor or focal point could be the palms of the hands and the fingers and thumbs. And you might take a moment here just to let your awareness flood into your palms and fingers and thumbs. And as you sense here, and as you relax, and as you feel, can you detect any subtle energy, any pulse or tingling or vibration? Whatever anchor you choose for this next period of time, let this be your primary focal point, the breath or sound or feeling. The mind will naturally come in with commentary. And when you notice, in your own way, escort your attention back to the here and now. When you notice your mind lost in a thought form, sense if you can recognize it with no judgment. And sense what it's like to let it go, to let it be, and then again to re-arrive. Sensing this breath on the inside right now, or these sounds, and the sense of aliveness in the palms and fingers and thumbs. Each time you wake up lost in the thought or lost in the dream, and each time when you re-arrive in the here and now, there is a quality of wakefulness. You embrace your capacity to be self-aware without judgment. And you may notice as well that as you re-relax and re-arrive, that you can sense in the foreground your anchor, and in the background, a heightened perception of everything that is changing. And if it feels right for you, you might just sense what it's like to take the seat of the witness or the seat of the observer. You might relax the focus on your anchor slightly and widen and broaden your attention to this perception of everything that is changing. When the mind again gets lost in thought, you begin again, you re-arrive back in the body. What could soften, what could relax? Come back to the anchor and hold it closely for a while. Re-arrive in presence. And as it feels right for you, you might again relax the anchor, widen your attention, broaden your attention to this perception of flow and sensing in your own way what it means to let things be as they are. And you might inquire, what is the attitude in your mind right now? Is there any subtle form of holding on to something or pushing something away? Is there a dreaminess? It might be helpful to reinforce your awareness of your anchor. Notice how intimately you can feel it. And then again, to broaden, widen your attention. And recognizing what is here and recognizing what is changing. And in this remaining 5 minutes or so, you might now fully refresh the practice. What could relax or soften inside right now? Could you relax your jaw and your tongue? Feel the inside of your mouth. And could you in any way soften the belly, the lower abdomen, and sense down through the floor of the pelvis? The soles of the feet and the heels. The backs of the hands. The palms and fingers and thumbs. And how intimately now can you feel your anchor, feel this breath on the inside, or the aliveness of these sounds, or the tingling or pulse in your palms. And can you widen and broaden your awareness, noticing what is changing, and exploring what it means to let things be as they are. Deeply relaxed, at the same time alert. And in these remaining minutes, taking time to soften any sense of doing and opening into a sense of being. Is there anything right now in the body and mind that could relax or soften or let go right now? And is there anything that could relax or soften or let go even more than that? Noticing where you feel this breath on the inside. You might now begin to deepen and lengthen and smooth out your breath. Where do you feel the breath inside? As I breathe in, I am aware of breathing in. As I breathe out, I'm aware of breathing out. Sensing what is present for you now, the quality of presence, and what may have shifted over this last 30 minutes. And with your eyes closed, you might let your head drift a little bit to the left and to the right. Sense how your body might like to move and take some time for your transition. Feel free to stretch or relax, whatever feels right, whatever feels good for you. And welcome back. It's great to have you here. I want to welcome everyone who is watching this live stream. It is just so cool to see so many friends I haven't met yet, so many people from different countries who are watching. It's a real joy to be able to offer these practices and to share them with you. So thank you. I grew up in the Pennsylvania Dutch country on a little farm outside of Kutztown. And if you've ever heard of a place called Crystal Cave, our farm was a couple miles from there, kind of over the hills. And the area where I grew up had lots of caves, lots of limestone caves. And many of them were just sort of unmarked in farmers' fields. And when I was a kid, we would go spelunking in a completely unprofessional, ridiculous way. Because whatever flashlights we'd have, we would go into these caves. And these were not like the caves that were just filled with crystals and great caverns. It was really more like going in the groundhog holes and crawling through sometimes mud, when it was rainy. And there would be some caverns, but it was an adventure, As they say, you get a bunch of young males around. Their inquiry pretty much is there anything life-threatening we can do around here? So that's what I was really into. And I remember actually one time in particular, I think it was Chauffeur's Cave, and being down in there for quite a while with some friends. And it was in springtime. And emerging from the cave, just, and the tiny little spaces, it would freak me out to do it now, I think. But emerging from the cave, and suddenly all the smells were so intense. The soil, just the greenery, the plants in spring. There was some flower scents I had never noticed before. It was such a rush of aliveness coming from being kind of in this sensory deprivation space for so long. And one of the things that I came to realize, or to really enjoy, was to really pay attention to that moment when I would emerge from the underground and feel that rush of my senses filled. I didn't realize how rich life was until I had had that time away from it. That leads a little bit to the talk I'd like to share tonight, and this talk is on joy. I'd like to talk about 4 things. First, why talk about joy when there's so much struggle going on right now? What gets in the way of the experience of joy? And what's the doorway to accessing joy? And then finally, to talk about how can you increase your capacity for joy in daily life? So I've been thinking about this talk of joy. It's been on the calendar for a while. I wasn't anticipating the coronavirus and all the incredible challenges so many people are going through. And I've been giving a lot of talks recently on what gets in the way of our true nature. I've talked quite a bit about the 5 mental states that occlude clear seeing and an open heart, of aversion, of craving, of restlessness and worry, of sloth and torpor and doubt. Talked recently about fear. Why talk about joy? And it's been on my mind. But I got a beautiful email from someone, from a depth practitioner who shared that she had gone to the mindful movement class before talk and did the meditation, and afterward, she wrote, after this meditation and Dharma talk, she said this. She said, I feel really good right now. And then wham, the thoughts came in. How can I be enjoying things while so many people are hurting? And logically and intellectually, I know me being distraught will not help the situation. I do believe that me feeling good puts me in the best position to help when I figure out what's mine to do. But the default reaction of guilt, feeling bad about feeling good, is hard to release. What an awesome observation. Is it okay for us to feel content and alive and happy when so many people are struggling? Can you relate to that? In the midst of all the turmoil, how many moments of peace, how many moments of presence, how many moments of contentment have you had in this last week? And to what degree are you okay? And to what degree have you felt safe and been engaged in your life, aware of the blessings in your life? There's this classic teaching around life is the 10,000 joys and the 10,000 sorrows. That's what life is. It's this fluctuation between deep, deep sorrow and ecstatic joy. And the practice is to be open to all of it. To remember that life is filled with light and it's also filled with darkness. Our practice is not to deny sorrow, not to deny joy, but also it's not to assume that any of these states are permanent. There's some people, when we talk about the Four Noble Truths, which are really the foundation of this practice, I remember many years ago someone observing that we have a tendency to focus either on the first two or the second two. And some of us have an inclination to focus on the first two. The first being that stress and suffering are part of the human experience. And the second, that there's a cause for that stress and suffering. And it has to do with attachment. It has to do with clinging. It has to do with identification. So there's those who are naturally inclined to want to really investigate, okay, here's the stress, where's the cause? It can be very, very fruitful. Then there are people who tend to focus more on the second two noble truths. And the third noble truth is that you can release stress and suffering. It's possible to let go. And the fourth, that there's a path, there are observations, there are techniques, there are practices that can lead to a further releasing of stress and suffering. And so there are some people who tend to focus more on those. Hey, you can let go, and there's a path of letting go. Each of them can be a little bit out of balance. Focusing just on the first two makes you a little bit grim. Okay, where's the source of suffering? Focusing on the letting go and the path of letting go can sometimes lead to premature transcendence or kind of spiritual bypassing. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. And really what it points to is this beautiful articulation of the middle way. Not too tight, not too loose. To notice when you're being grim, notice when you're easing into premature transcendence. To neither deny nor indulge in what is arising. That is to say, if you're feeling joy, if you're feeling sorrow, don't pretend it isn't there. But don't hang on to it and thinking that it's not going to change. It's an exquisite teaching and a brutal way to practice because we get so attached or we get so aversive. But what happens is the more you recognize this law of impermanence of change, the more it can really up the ante on your capacity to enjoy. When there's only just a little bit of dessert left, rather than grieving over the fact that it's almost over, how much can you savor those last few bites? So just as joy can arise, just as pain can arise, and the question is there some way that you can kind of incline your awareness a little more toward joy? Maybe even when you find yourself caught in sorrow or unhappiness. So what's the doorway to joy? When I think of a time when I was pretty caught and identified in not joy, I'm reminded of, I think I was maybe 13 years old. My sister and brother-in-law had just gotten married. They decided to go on their honeymoon in the National Boundary Waters canoe area between Minnesota and Canada. And my parents and her parents, my aunt and uncle decided it would be really fun for them to go along with them, and they brought along my little brother and myself. So we had a bunch of people for 10 days. We were canoeing and portaging and bringing all of our food for 10 days. And back in those days, all the tents were canvas, and we hit a spell of rain. I'd say it was more than a spell of rain. It was days and days of cold rain. That kind of rain where in the bow of the canoe with my dad, a big wave would come over me. I'd be warm for a minute and then freezing cold again. When we would make camp, at one time in particular, the tents were soaked, our sleeping bags were soaked. At that time, I think I was 6'5" and about 85 pounds. I was wearing jeans. You know what it's like when it's cold and your jeans are soaking wet. You don't want to move because another bit of jeans material is going to freeze your skin. Couldn't get a fire going. I looked at my dad, and I distinctly remember saying, if I had an anvil, I would tie it around my neck and I'd throw it in that lake. I didn't know this about my dad at that time, but my dad had been in World War II, in the front lines, had been twice decorated for a number of sustained days of combat without reinforcements, had been wounded twice, had seen a lot of real hell. He gave me a look that I'd never seen before, a very, very steely look. And he said to me, "Hey, no one's shooting at us." That totally shut me up. Something about the conviction and the way he delivered that line was like, wow, yeah, I get it. No one's shooting at us. That's begin kind of a catchphrase for me from time to time when I'm complaining. No one's shooting at me right now. In a roundabout way, it points toward the doorway. And the doorway is gratitude and appreciation. So it's one thing just to think, okay, no one's shooting at me. That does open up a sense of gratitude, but I'd like to talk a little bit more about some of the other avenues of gratitude. Because gratitude and appreciation, they are a state changer. If you like, just close your eyes just for a moment, just to kind of get a sense of this. And if you would, take 3 slow, deep breaths now. And as you breathe in, just sense what's here. And as you exhale, sense what it's like to soften and let go inside. And if you would, bring your mind to someone or something that you feel grateful for or you appreciate right now. Someone or something you appreciate. And if you like, you can bring your hand to your heart and just hold your hand there and take some time just to reflect on this. Can you create a mental image? Can you sense what it feels like when you turn toward gratitude and appreciation? And whatever you're feeling inside, could you let that get a little bit bigger, as if you could breathe into it like you're fanning the coals? And just sense whatever is present, just in this 1 minute of reflection. Then if you like, you can deepen the breath. And If you'd like, you can open your eyes or you can leave them closed. Gratitude and appreciation can be a doorway to joy or to more wholesome states. There was a time when I was really into cultivating gratitude and appreciation, and for many, many people, I created a gratitude journal. But my list was a little bit different. I would write down 10 things that I was grateful for, but my rule was I could not repeat myself. Very, very powerful for about a week, and then I started running out of things. And then, out of desperation, because I like to stick to my commitments, I started listing the body parts that weren't hurting. And even though I was filling my commitment for those 10 things I was appreciative of, it actually was a really powerful practice. It's kind of like no one shooting at me. Kind of like, wow, my big left toe isn't hurting. And it really sort of reinforced this sense of like, hey, I'm not dead yet. This is good. So pausing to reflect on what you're grateful for can be immense. But in a way that doesn't really speak to the potency of kind of unwinding what occurs when you're stuck. When you're really, really sensing this sorrow is deep, this grief is deep, this sense of unease is really, really deep. Just turning to gratitude doesn't necessarily make it go away. It can change your state in a powerful way. There was a time someone told me they were just unhappy. They just had a sense of malaise. And at some point, he told me he was just drinking a beer and he just asked himself, I'm so unhappy. What's this all about? And for some reason, just this little voice just said, your marriage is over. Maybe it needs a makeover, but I'm pretty sure this is over. And then something in his awareness said like, wow, I just named it. That's true. This points toward a really courageous part of meditation and a courageous part of life, which is when you're not feeling joyful, when you're experiencing a sustained period of one of those 10,000 sorrows, it's the courage to turn toward it. Different forms of meditation focus on different elements. Some focus on concentration, just on sustaining one pointed attention. Some of them focus more on just being the observer of what's changing, this kind of open monitoring of what's coming through and sensing your relationship to it. Some traditions focus solely on loving presence, on compassion. And some focus simply on resting in being, resting in effortlessness. One of the elements that I so enjoy about insight meditation or vipassana meditation is the invitation that when something arises that you really sense is between you and feeling free, that you actually turn toward it and you begin to investigate it. You look closely at it. Where does it live on the inside? What are you believing about this? How old is this? What happens if you bring a sense of kindness toward this? And quite often, when you have the courage, when it feels right, to turn your attention, to really investigate it, there can be some very, very powerful insights that can arise. I recently had one of these moments, and I thought I might share it. I've been really, really busy, transitioning to kind of online and trying to be supportive in all the ways I can be. I have been just 7 days a week going at it. So I've also been a little bit removed from COVID-19 because I've been living pretty much in isolation here, and when I go out every couple of weeks, I'm fully prepped and pretty much just living here in the woods. So I haven't been really touched by the virus until a good friend informed me that her dad was on a ventilator. And then later that her dad passed. And because of my connection to her, I began to kind of really open to what this must be like. And so when I responded to her in an email, I found myself just imagining what it must be like for her to lose her dad. And she was able to communicate with him through a recorded message that he got to hear. I mean, it was just so deeply, deeply touching. And in that sort of empathic rush of what must this be like to lose someone, I thought of my wife. I thought of Tara, of what it would be like if she were to contract this and find herself unable to fight it. And I began to feel a very intense pang of loss and grief. And something in me knew it was important to stay with it. And so I stayed with it, and I could feel there's just the clench and the hollowness and the helplessness. And I brought my hand to my heart, just a sense, can I just hold this in loving presence? And as I did so, and just kind of like being there for a while, I could begin to feel a connection to Lynn and to her family and with her dad and to all those who are in fear of losing loved ones. And I began to feel this feeling inside began to shift. It began to move from this intense, gripping fear into a much more expansive, connected flow. And then it began to shift even more into this sense of like, not to overstate it, but a sense of just almost like ecstatic appreciation. This recognition that, well, actually, she's really healthy and really vibrant and really alive right now. And we have this time right now. And what an incredible blessing to have what I have right now. It's a very powerful experience for me. I'm normally not one to sort of embrace the sorrows, but because for whatever reason I had the presence to really stay with that clench of sorrow and fear and grief, because I could stay with it and somehow call on compassion and empathy, I was able to kind of ride that wave to really move to this place of deep appreciation and gratitude and embracing the aliveness that's right here. That is an elemental part of the practice. And I'd like to offer a little experience, which I've led before, but it can be very, very helpful. And sort of it's informed by the work of focusing and by Dr. Eugene Gendlin. It's called Clearing the Space, where you ask yourself a question. And the question I'll be asking you is, what's between you and joy? And what you'll do is you'll just sort of let one thing come to mind. And it might be, if I think about that right now, it might be, I haven't heard from someone in a while, and I hope they're okay. And so what you'll do is you just say hello to that. And you imagine you just move that to the side, and you can just place the concern for it to the side. It doesn't go away, it's just the concern for it to the side. And then again, I'll ask you, what's between you and feeling joy? And you'll just let something come up. You'll say hello to it and move it to the side. And I'm going to ask this question 5 times. And what it will do is it'll begin to help you sort of name the landscape of what's between you and feeling joy. So if you like, if it feels right for you, you can close your eyes. And again, you might just sense the breath. Use the next few breaths as a way of calling your attention back inside. And when you ask yourself now, what's between you and feeling joy? What arises? And in your own way, can you just let it know you see it? Say hello to it. And imagine now you could place the concern for that to the side. And then again, what's between you and feeling joy? And as you name this, as you recognize this, again, say hello to it. And imagine you could slide the concern for that to the side. Kind of clearing the mind again. In your life right now, what's between you and feeling joy? And say hello to this. And imagine you might just place the concern for that to the side. What's between you and feeling joy? And in your own way, let this know you see it. Say hello to it. And imagine you could place the concern for this to the side. And one final time. What's between you and feeling joy? Say hello to this. And imagine you could place the concern for this to the side. And take a few moments now just to reflect on what you've named. Sensing the landscape of what's between you and joy right now. You may find perhaps just a little bit of space in just naming them. Or you may find how alive, how tender these issues are in your life. And you might just sense in your own way if there's something here that you might like to investigate or might like a little more time or attention from you in the future. Just let that know in your own way that you're here. When the conditions are right, your intention is to fully be with this. And if you like, you can now gently deepen your breath, and if you like, you can open the eyes, or you can remain with them closed. This can be a very powerful exercise, I find. It can be a little brutal, but you're cultivating a sense of wisdom here. To be able to name what's between you and feeling joy, it begins to shift your relationship to it a little bit, I find. In the last month or so, a lot of the talks that I have been offering have been focusing on that which obscures clear seeing and an open heart. What it's like to really understand aversion, anger, blame, to understand the craving, wanting, fantasizing, planning mind, and what it's like to work with a mind that is restless and worried and can't settle. What it's like to work with a mind state that's filled with lethargy and sloth. And what it's like to work with a mind that is paralyzed by doubt or ruthless self-criticism. What it's like to work with fear. The interesting things here are that these elements that I just named can really be seen as weather systems. They obscure the sun, they obscure clear seeing, and yet when they're not present, there is the sun, there is the light. So taking time to reflect on what's between you and feeling joy is, in a sense, reflecting on what's between you and a mind that is luminous and vibrant and at peace. And taking the time to investigate, which we don't have time in this talk, but to reflect on that practice of rain, to recognize what's here. The A, to ask if you can allow it, if you can accept it, which you can't all the time, and that's strategic sometimes to not look. But if it does feel safe to investigate somatically, investigate your beliefs, and most importantly, take time to call on loving presence, on compassion and kindness. And you may find that something that feels very, very tight may begin to soften in some way. There might be some insight that arises that, or some possibility that wasn't there before. You know, every coin has two sides. When there is something unpleasant or negative, there's always something inherently positive in that. In the same way, quite often where there's light, there is shadow. And part of our training is to really see that clearly. And to see where you cling, to see where you're caught in aversion, and then to investigate the nature of that clinging, that identification, and to explore how you can soften and how you can let go. So in a sense, we are exploring equanimity, a kind of a steadiness that is present in the fluctuating 10,000 joys and 10,000 sorrows. But that being said, we can also train ourselves to look for the good, to look for the wholesome. It's a very positive and powerful training for your mind. In one of our week-long meditation retreats, there was someone. Most of these retreats attract a lot of really politically liberal people. And there was someone from a different political orientation on this retreat who was getting very, very upset and very angry by some of the comments and some of the sharings. And he expressed this to one of the teachers, and he was so agitated by this that he was contemplating leaving. And as he met with the teacher, he just complained, these people are so naive. I built my life from the ground up. I didn't take any handouts. I took responsibility for what it means to make my life what it is. And these people here are so soft. They're so naive. These are people who just want to give the money away that I earned to support people who aren't taking responsibility for their life. And it disgusts me, and I think I have to leave. Pretty strong statement. I was so touched and inspired by this teacher. As he listened, and he actually reflected the words back, so he wanted to make sure this person really heard him. And he said, to some degree, I'm one of those liberal people too. But I'm wondering, can we both agree that we want people to be happy and free from suffering? That question reframed the conversation, because this man said, absolutely. I also want people to be happy and free from suffering. And then they began to open up how they had different perspectives on how that could happen. I love that story because it shifted polarizing into finding something wholesome, to seeing the good in the conversation. The recognition that neither of us want people to needlessly suffer. When it comes to looking for the good and embracing joy in your life, there's a shadow side to it, and there's something to really be aware of, because sometimes we so want to get to that joy stuff that it leads to what we call premature transcendence, or spiritual bypassing. Because we so want to get into the joy stuff, we tend to not be willing to name or feel the shadow side of things. Another shadow of the practice is feeling guilty when you're not feeling joy. I certainly know this one. Like, well, I'm a long-term meditator and I'm a Dharma teacher. I am not supposed to be feeling this. I'm supposed to be feeling joy and happiness. And we can easily fall into this trap. If I'm not feeling joy, something's wrong with me. And so what that points to, again, is this middle way. Remembering that all things change, that when you're struggling, when you are in one of those 10,000 sorrows, remembering that this will pass, that there are practices that can help you to see into the nature of its impermanence, and to get the lessons you might need to learn from that. But also when you're feeling on top of the world and you feel like you arrived, there in particular you want to remember this too. This too is going to change. But as all these heart practices that are part of this practice of cultivating kindness and joy and equanimity, they're designed to guide you into wholesome states. You know, when you wish yourself well, when you wish others well. When you begin to open to joy, to the possibility of joy. Quite often we are invited to really focus on those first two noble truths. You know, find the suffering, find the source, find the clinging, find the identification. It's easy to get grim about this practice. But just as we're invited to investigate the phenomena that arise in our experience, it's very powerful when you experience a wholesome state, when you experience joy. Investigate it. Take time to get to know it, because when you do, you're actually increasing your capacity for that wholesome state. Most of us have a happiness level. You only allow yourself to get so happy before you start getting worried or where you self-sabotage. And my buddy Rick Hansen, who wrote Buddha's Brain, speaks so beautifully about this, that when you train yourself to see the good, you are rewiring your brain for happiness. And there are a couple ways you can do this. And perhaps the best way, considering we only have just a few minutes left in our talk, might be if I were to guide you through a little reflection and then to close with a poem. So if you like, you can close your eyes. And you might take 3 breaths. Softening on the out-breath. And bring into mind someone or something that touches your heart, something you're grateful for. So I like to say quite often, go with a dog or a pet or a plant. But take a few moments just to settle on one thing that you appreciate, that you're grateful for. If you like, you can bring your hand to your heart, just as as a gesture of really paying attention to not only what it feels like inside, but also the willingness to open into a more wholesome, alive sense of presence. And here are some of the ways that you can begin to kind of amplify this feeling. Notice where you feel it in your inside. You might lengthen and deepen your breath a bit. Where do you feel it? Can you sense the intensity of it? Where do you feel it the most intense? And can you give it permission to grow? Can you sustain the feeling in some way? And as you sense it inside, as you sense its intensity and give it permission to be there, as you sense if you can sustain the feeling, take a moment to reflect on why this particular person or thing is significant and important to you. Why is your capacity for joy and happiness important to you? And if you like, just imagine this just falling away, and in your own way, just sense your willingness to increase your capacity for joy, no matter what is present in your life. To sense in your own way how your capacity for joy and wholesome states allows you to be more intimately present to all that arises in your life, to those who are most important to you, and to truly be of service from a place of overflow, sensing that possibility. And now reflecting on the following words from John O'Donohue. It's entitled A Blessing. May you awaken to the mystery of being here and enter the quiet immensity of your own presence. May you have joy and peace in the temple of your senses. May you receive great encouragement when new frontiers beckon. May you respond to the call of your gifts and find the courage to follow its path. May the flame of anger free you from falsity. May warmth of heart keep your presence aflame, and may anxiety never linger about you. May your outer dignity mirror an inner dignity of soul. May you take time to celebrate the quiet miracles that seek no attention. May you be consoled in the secret sympathy of your soul. May you experience each day as a sacred gift woven around the heart of wonder. As you're ready, you can gently deepen your breath. As you're ready, you can open your eyes. Thank you so much for your time and attention. Wonderful to be with you. May you enjoy, have a wonderful evening together and beyond. I so appreciate your presence, and I wish you well. And if you'd like to stay for one last really stupid joke that I couldn't work into my talk, here it is. Apologies to anyone this offends. The story goes that Jesus is down by the gates of heaven, and this old man comes up to the gates. And St. Peter asks the old man, "What have you done to deserve entry to heaven?" And this old man who can barely see, he says, "To be honest, I'm merely a single carpenter. It was my son that was truly great. Although he wasn't my biological son, his birth was miraculous. I still loved him very much. And later in life, he went through many trials and transformations. He spread his joy. He told his story. And all over the world, he's known even to this day." Jesus looks at the man, he has a tear in his eyes, and he says, "Father?" And the old man looks up and he goes, "Pinocchio?" I'm sorry. Enjoy.